Hello and welcome to this Follow the Boat Extra.
In this clip we are going to be talking about the different navigation systems that we use aboard Esper. If you caught yesterday's episode, you'll have seen us using a whole host of different applications as we worked our way through reefed areas in the Anambas Islands. So in this clip we're just going to talk a little bit more about those systems, the applications that we use on our phones, and we're also going to be talking a little bit more about how to actually navigate through reefs.
So first up we're going to talk about Esper's onboard navigation system. Like most yachts we have a chart plotter system. It's B&G and it's called Triton, and it's integrated with the NEMA 2000 interface protocol, something like that.
It uses NEMA 2000 like most modern systems these days. The Triton system are the repeaters and the 12-inch capacitive screen we have down by the chart table. But we also have a standard 8-inch plotter up in the cockpit. And because it's all integrated, because it uses the N2K protocol, it means that they can talk to each other and share information. So the chart plotter down below is the one that contains the memory stick with the charts on it. And that is then repeated to this chart plotter up here. We do the same as well with the radar. It's a 4G B&G radar system. 4G just means that it turns on very quickly, there's no warming up, and it's very low powered as well. And because it uses that same protocol as the rest of the system, it means that we can overlay that data across both chart plotters.
We've also got AIS, haven't we?
Yeah, so we've been using AIS for many years now, but we had an old Comar, I think it was Comar 200, I think it was called. And it was, it's about 8-9 years old now.
Yeah, we got it before we went through the Red Sea, didn't we? Yeah, so 2008.
So that, of course, didn't have the new NEMA 2000 protocol built in. So it was a little bit frustrating trying to share that data across the different plotters. So we now have a Vespa 6000, and that does have the N2K protocol, and it just simply means you just plumb it into the rest of the network. And that data is also shared not only on the chart plotters, but also on your iPad as well, which we'll come on to in a little bit.
Yeah.
The chart system is Navionics, and as I say, that's just on a memory card. The subscription to that is, it's about £200-ish, depends on the region that you're buying into, and then you pay a nominal fee to upgrade that every year with the latest chart data. So it's pretty straightforward.
So we're going to talk about apps now, and like everyone, we use our phone and tablets and so forth for navigating as well. And there are a lot of apps out there which are very useful. We do use the same one as we use for Esper's main computer. We have a Navionics app, which I'm sure people may have heard of. It's really very useful. You just download the area that you need. So at the moment we've got Africa and Asia. I think it's about 20 quid, but it may have changed, something like that. So you get that whole area, and then you just download, when you have decent internet connection, the areas within that area that you need. It's very easy to update, just updates very, very quickly and very, very often. So you've got a lot of information that's really right up to the minute. Very easy to use, very simple. It has a really nice little feature, which is the little feature we found recently on Tides, wasn't it?
Mm.
Yeah, so if you press the nearest tidal station mark on your app, it will then bring up a little flowchart below showing you the high and low tides and so forth, and you can run your finger along this, and as you do the depths go up and down on the chart. So if you're planning to be there in 5 hours, you know what the depth's going to be.
Yeah, it's a really useful feature. And our other favourite feature, of course, is the annotation, the whole social side of Navionics, and the ability to actually annotate the charts.
Annotate the tarts or annotate the charts, take your pick.
So to actually include your own data on mainly anchorages, but it could be anything, could be facilities ashore as well. So quite often you'll come into an anchorage that you don't know and you'll see a load of little anchor signs, but we try to be as descriptive as possible. It's very frustrating when you see an anchor sign that just says anchored here.
Well, really? When? What was it like?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point, because they could have been sailing a catamaran. It's very low, shallow waters, and they put that they had 3 meters underneath them. But you don't know how much they drafted. So that's the flip side of the annotations, is that you have to take people's opinions and observations with a little pinch of salt, a bit of caution. But in places like the Anambas, we found it invaluable, didn't we?
Yeah, there were a few. There weren't many, but there were a few, and there were some that were very, very good. But as you were saying about the depth, it's absolutely meaningless unless you know what stage of the tide you're at. So.
Navionics also has a sonar system, it's called, and this is where you can bring up additional depth information. I am not sure if this is produced by the users, because another feature is that you can plug into your network on Wi-Fi and take the depth data from your chart plotter and overlay it on your Navionics app. And that will then draw a much more precise depth contour. So I'm not sure if the sonar system is an amalgamation of what people have recorded, but it's not got us into trouble, but I've noticed that it's not always precise.
No, because if it's been put by any old sailor who thinks they've got the right information and hasn't, it's potentially dangerous. So we take all of these things with a little pinch of salt, don't we?
Absolutely. But, on the whole, Navionics is good. The cons, I just get very frustrated with trying to put in waypoints, anything to do with longitude and latitude. If you're given a waypoint, to actually try and add it in, it's really frustrating, isn't it?
Yeah, on the app it's hopeless. It's all right on the big computer.
On the whole, we use it a lot, don't we?
I use it all the time. As soon as we go sailing, I bring my phone up into the cockpit and I have Navionics on, so I'm watching all the time. So I'm not necessarily behind the wheel very often, not often looking necessarily at the chart data. So I can sit here reading and also just having a quick look, obviously looking out as well, but yeah, really useful. So another of the apps that we have been using is CMAP Plan to Nav, and that's because before we went to the Anambas, we were told by a few sources that the Navionics charts were out. So this is a bit of a worry, so we thought we might as well get as many other information sources as possible. Yeah,
and we were told that the CMAP, and of course a lot of you will know CMAP, we were told that that app is more precise in terms of positional data of land masses. And in fact, we found it to be true in the Anambas, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
So Navionics was out by about 200 metres, and whereas the CMAP was pretty spot on. I should just add, by the way, I've only noticed this the other day. When we returned from the Anambas, I got in touch with Navionics and I told them about this. And I've since been looking at some of the chart data on Navionics.
Yeah.
I think they've shifted it.
Oh, good. Oh, good. They have listened.
I think. Don't take my word for it, but
so.
I noticed that all of our waypoints and annotations we put in that were on land have now...
Okay.
So that's good.
Yeah, because we were anchoring on land and we were visiting chemists out at sea. Yeah, so it didn't really make sense.
So back then we were using Plan to Nav, and we found it much more precise. But I have to say, Plan to Nav it looks a bit old school, doesn't it?
Not sophisticated.
No, it's not a patch on Navionics. It really isn't. It's very basic. I found zooming in and out really clunky. It's just kind of jerks and, useful to have as secondary data.
It does the job, it's just not as pretty or as user-friendly. The next one is AIS Sailor. Difficult to give you too much information on that one because we came to it quite late in the day. A very good friend, one of our Patreons, sent me an iPad.
Yeah.
I'd never had one before. We don't have anything with an eye in front of it, so it was all a bit daunting to begin with. But eventually, when I got it working, I fell in love with it. And a friend of ours in the Anambas, Helene, said she uses something called AIS Sailor. So we downloaded the app, and yeah, it is. It's a really, really nice app. Lots of information.
It's very intuitive. That's what I like about it. Just very well thought out. Really well thought out. In fact, it doesn't even feel like an app. It feels like a proper charting application that you would use on a chart plotter. Just things like the pull-out menu system, very fluid. As you say, we can't compare it as to how well it actually reproduces the chart data in places like the Anambas. But I don't know, I can see us using it more and more.
I think so.
It's just a solid piece of of application. One of the things that I do really like about it as well is it's very easy to relay AIS data. Also your ship's position and lots of additional NEMA data through the Wi-Fi network. The only con that I have with it is that you have to pay for these extra features.
Yeah, you do. We bit the bullet and did buy it.
We did.
One or two features, and they were worth it.
They're definitely worth it. Another app that we haven't been using, that some of you may do, is OpenCPN. Now, we've used OpenCPN in the past. In fact, we have it on our backup ship's computer, but I just found it didn't port very well to the Android system, and certainly not on the small phone. For me, it just didn't work, so we didn't use that. But talking of OpenCPN, of course, you have the opportunity to use CAP files, and CAP files are basically Google Earth satellite imagery that you can overlay on top of your charts within OpenCPN. It's a very useful feature. And in fact, if you're in Southeast Asia, there is a man out there called Terry Sargent, and he has been putting together a great big database of CAP files as well as anchorages as well. So find Terry Sargent on Facebook, and I'm sure he'll be able to help you out with those.
Yeah, I mean, the use of Google satellite imagery, well, not Google, it could be any satellite imagery. We started doing that back in 2010 in the Red Sea, when we knew we were going to be going through a lot of corals, bommies, marsers they call them. They're like fjords that go into the desert, and they're just fringed in reef and really dangerous. And no charts were going to give us that information. So you started to download and store images, didn't you, from Google Earth?
Yeah, well, back then we were just using the standard Google Earth application for a PC. And so we were caching the Google Earth imagery offline. We were using a USB GPS puck to plug in and getting very, very good data. Yeah. And in fact, a lot of the time, we would be following what we were seeing on Google Earth correctly, and on the charts, we were going over land again.
So the charts really weren't much use at all in that particular area. It may have changed. I mean, that was 8 years ago, but it was eyeball and Google. Yeah.
Yep. So, talking about satellite imagery, let's just talk about a couple of apps that we've been using quite extensively. The first is called Orbital, and it is becoming more and more popular amongst yachties.
Yes, but is it Orbital or is it Ovital? Ovital, Orbital?
I don't know. Does anyone actually know? Orbital, Ovital? We're not sure. It's Chinese. And that's one of the problems, unfortunately. Because it's Chinese, they can't put it on the Google Play Store for some reason. So you have to go to the Orbital website and download the APK file and sideload it onto your Android system. It's basically, well, mainly Google Earth, but you can actually use other maps and charts and satellite images. But it's mainly Google Earth in a map app, I suppose. We used it all the time, didn't we?
Yeah.
It allows you to do quite a lot of things that you can do in Google Earth. One of the things that we were doing a lot of, as well as just examining the satellite images, was to actually draw vectors around the reef so that you could see them nice and bright, sort of in a nice bright yellow colour as an overlay on top of the satellite image, and that was quite useful.
Particularly in that very bright sunshine when you're in the cockpit and you've got this intense sunshine on your screen. It was difficult to see, wasn't it?
Yeah, those Google Earth blues and greens, they don't show up very well, do they? It's a good app. It's very fluid and very easy to use once you've got your head around a few basics. I do find the menu system a bit unintuitive. And I think because it was Chinese, it's been translated. Some of it doesn't quite make sense. A few of the features aren't available unless you have a pro version of it. And just a warning, it's a hugely resource-intensive app. It's a battery drainer, so just be aware of that. One of the problems with Google Earth is those blue-green muted colours. And that brings us on to another app that we've just grown to love. It's called All-in-One Offline Maps. It's a very simple mapping app that allows you to use a whole host of different satellite images and maps as well. Not so much charts. I don't think you can get charts on it with sort of chart datum data. But for satellite imagery, it was amazing, wasn't
That's what it's all about. It's so clear. I mean, you were identifying little villages that didn't appear anywhere else. And in fact, that's how we found Ayaputi.
Yeah, this is, so just to clarify, this is not using Google Earth satellite imagery. This is the great thing. You have a whole load of different data that you can draw from. And if you saw in yesterday's episode, we were using the Esri maps, or the Esri satellite imagery. And for certain areas, the Esri satellites were far superior to Google Earth. So that was the first benefit.
Yeah.
But what was really good about all-in-one offline maps is the ability to layer different maps on top of each other. I should say satellite images. And then you can change the saturation and the opacity of each layer. Now, the advantage of doing this is that you can really bring out those contrasts, really make them stand out, and they become quite garish, cartoon-like. But, you know, the contrast between the reef and the deeper waters was so clear, wasn't it?
It was a game changer once we started using it, wasn't it? It really was amazing to see this incredible clarity sitting here in this bright light.
Yeah, it's definitely an app that we now use frequently. So really do recommend that. It's super quick, super fast, very easy to use, and unlike Overtool, downloading the satellite imagery is very simple because you just have to literally zoom in where you want to go and it will download it and keep it offline. Overtool is a bit more involved. The other thing I really like is just the fact you've got all the information on one screen. So you've got your position, you've got your bearing, you can move the chart or the satellite image around to find out how far away an object is. It's very, very simple to use.
Probably a good idea just to mention paper charts at this stage, as I'm sure some people are going to say, why don't we use them? Well, in fact, we do use them. We use them when we're doing long ocean crossings and when we're sailing offshore. We always have the paper chart out. And we do have loads of paper charts stuffed under the bed, and we'll pull them out when we need to. So yeah, they are great, but I think that these days electronic charts are taking over, and we use them more as backup.
Yeah, I think most people are comfortable using the electronic charts. There was the old issue of, well, what happens if your electrics go down? And, you know, it's a fair argument, so it is always good to have paper,
Yes.
charts as backup. But
when we were in the Maldives, do you remember the charts that we had for the Maldives?
Yeah,
they were terrible.
hopeless.
And they weren't any better than that. And we got the only ones that you could buy. And they were pretty useless, really. So, yeah.
We were just using Google Earth, and of course that other application that everyone should be using is Mark 1 Eyeball. A word on navigating through reefs. We received a question via Facebook from Deborah Taylor recently, who wanted to know how we do it. So there are a few rules that we do adhere to, and I think perhaps most importantly, and this is one of my first lessons I ever learned when I started navigating, was collate as much information about a place beforehand as possible. And if you've watched our recent How to Anchor special that we did, that's one of the things that we talk about, is arming yourself with as much information as possible. So it will be paper charts, satellite imagery,
Pilot
guides, other websites that might be producing publishing waypoints. Get all that information together. Get yourself as familiar as possible with the location you are aiming for.
We seem to fall into routine now where I go at the front and spot, so I'm right up as high at the front as I can be, and I put my polarised glasses on, which help you see through the water. You need to have the sun behind you as you're coming in or you're leaving. I was
going to say, that's actually a really important point, is that there are only certain times of the day that you can go into a reef safely because of the reflection of the sun on the water.
And early morning and late evening is no good. You need to have the sun slightly higher up in the sky. And really we were finding in the Red Sea, certainly after 3, you didn't want to be going in, you couldn't see, all you see is water.
Yeah.
And we really did watch what the other person at the front was doing in order to decide how to get through and round those bommies. So, yeah, that's a really important part. And then once you're into the anchorage, you've then got to find somewhere to drop the hook that you feel safe and confident about.
But just going back to you were talking about you being at the front spotting, and then I'm here. What I'm doing is I'm looking at you. I'm looking in the water as well, like you are, but also having the depth data up. That was the most important thing, and also satellite imagery on the phone as well. So, it's it's a team effort, and they do suggest generally that the higher up you can get, the more advantage that you have in being able to spot the reefs.
Yeah, a number of people have actually asked the question about, do we send the drone up? And it's a really good idea. In fact, when we were in Moon Rock Bay, you sent the drone up and you discovered an entire reef that nobody knew about and we hadn't been told about. There were no notes on. Just a bit outside, and we did some beautiful photography there. So yes, if you've got 3 people...
Yeah.
One on the helm, one spotting and one handling the drone, then a drone would be potentially a really good way to help you get in.
Definitely.
And some people also use dinghies, don't they? Sometimes they'll send the dinghy out in front and follow the dinghy through. I mean, there is that. But with the 2 of us, it's not. These things are not possible because we both need to be on the boat.
So you're in the reef, and now you've got to work out where to anchor. And that really just comes down to working out how much swinging room you need, other boats in there, how much they need, and to bear in mind any sort of prevailing winds or change in direction of the wind and how that may affect how the boat ends up laying within the reef itself.
Yes, and the tides as well. And by the way, Deborah, we have been into anchorages like that before, and we've looked and looked and we've tried and we've laid the anchor and we brought the anchor back up again and we've left because we haven't felt that it was safe enough. So don't be afraid to do that. Don't be afraid to give up. If it's not right, if you're uncomfortable, you don't do it. And finally, a word on degrees, minutes, seconds.
Don't get them muddled up. So there are different ways that we can read the same coordinate. There are decimal degrees, degrees, decimal minutes, and degrees, minutes, and seconds. Now, decimal degrees, you'll find applications like Google Earth, and more modern applications will be using decimal degrees. That's basically the one great big or 2 great big long numbers. Say 100 degrees, 0.45, 10, 9, blah, 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 blah. That's decimal degrees. Traditionally, charts were written in degrees, minutes, and seconds. It's too long to explain here now. You can go away and research it. But on the whole, generally, as a rule, us nautical navigators will be using degrees and decimal minutes. Do not get degrees, decimal minutes muddled up with degrees, minutes, and seconds, because they are 2 different things. We know of a boat who got it muddled up and they ended up running aground. So just be aware of that. Make sure that all your data is using the same format.
Thanks for watching. We hope that you found it of some use. We will put in the description below links to all the things that we mentioned.
If you like the video, then please, of course, do share it. It really does help us. Like it, and if you haven't yet subscribed to our channel, then please do subscribe and you'll get notifications when we next put out a video. And finally, as we always say, we love hearing from you, and this particular subject we've been talking about, I think there's going to be a lot of opinions, a lot of people out there with a lot of knowledge, maybe plenty more knowledge than we have. We'd love to hear from you, so please do leave your comments below. In the meantime,
peace and fair winds.